Blogging on YouTube, I loved working with ready-made material. He earned money by exposing myths, legends, and urban horror stories. I took the plot, checked it, found the truth, shot a video, posted it. That's the whole recipe. Money dripped, subscribers grew, but I've always had a nagging feeling of dissatisfaction. I wanted not just to parasitize on the content, but to create it. To get into the thick of the legend, to discover the secret, to show the truth, which is much more interesting than fiction. It's time to change the format. And so I earned enough to afford the luxury. Go to the field conditions. Like any blogger, I had a small but cohesive team. Igor is the editor and sound designer. Alyona is the editor, and Seva is also the main inspirer and part-time cameraman. With him, we set off on a dangerous journey to the famous Nasanov forest. Haven't you heard? This is more often where people disappear. I already had one video on the channel, which has garnered more than 5 million views, although I took it from stock footage and rewrites of finished articles. Seva convinced me that I should go there. The views spoke for themselves. People are interested in this topic, and he was right. There's no other place like this. This forest is not as famous as the Japanese plain of blue trees, but it is hardly inferior in the number of mysterious disappearances. My past exposure was based on a single thought. In every dense forest, one way or another, people disappear, some more, some less. In any case, there is more often a record holder by accident, of course, simply because these are the statistics. We were going to spend 1 day and 1 night in the forest. During this time, we would have had time to film the material. We prepared thoroughly, went to a tourist store, bought a couple of tents. We collected various dry rations to make a mini review along the way. The road to the forest was fun. Seva and I presented the finished video in advance. We'll walk through the woods, find something mysterious but meaningless, and at the end, we'll show that nothing happened to us. We were wondering if it would be depressing. They came up with ideas on how to diversify the material, what interesting things to tell. The road stretched through a hilly area. On one side, there are expanses of meadows, already covered with golden autumn grass. On the other hand, the forest is powerful, dark, and mysterious. There are no villages or other buildings nearby. There's nowhere to put the car to insure against theft. The road is wild, and that's it. We had to choose the most unpopulated place and drive our Jeep into the bushes. The main thing is to find it yourself later, Seva said. We moved into the thicket. Just in case, they left marks on the trees, tying the trunks with pieces of signal tape. Suddenly we get lost and there will be a landmark. The forest was incredible. The mighty pines seemed to rest against the sky, and the branches intertwined into a solid, impenetrable crown. Sunlight barely penetrated through that green ceiling. The air was filled with the smells of foliage and pine needles. The silence was almost frightening. It immediately became clear to me why so many legends were made up about this particular forest. Its atmosphere excited the imagination. Seva enthusiastically filmed everything that caught his eye. I was going to express a few thoughts and share my feelings on camera, but suddenly the cameraman took the object aside and shouted, "Look!" He pointed to a small clearing where 2 tents were standing. Even from afar, it was noticeable that they had been left there a long time ago. They were torn, faded, and covered with dry leaves. We got closer and saw clothes, dishes, sleeping bags, backpacks. Seva took pictures, taking close-ups of torn awnings and abandoned things. I started commenting on what I was seeing as I walked. Look, the equipment is not cheap. These were not easy amateurs who came here for fun, for the thrill. You look at it, and it gets creepy. What made experienced tourists abandon their belongings and run away from here? Strange, strange. I hope we find out. I wanted to make some kind of guess, but I didn't have an answer. Why did people run away? Or have they disappeared? Or maybe there is in the forest? Underground caves. People fell in there and died. I realized that my skepticism and fearlessness of mysticism do not ensure us from accidental death. Siva didn't seem to understand this yet, and was pulling me forward with words. Let's go see if we can find any more tracks. We continued on our way, still discussing the strange find. I still felt uncomfortable, and he tried to calm down. Let go of your fears. Who said it would be easy? The work of bloggers like us is often life-threatening. We've already walked about 10 kilometers, and they didn't really find anything. In some places, there was trash and some scraps of rags. My legs ached, my back ached, and the straps of my backpack were on my shoulders. Finally, we found a suitable clearing to camp in. The sun was already setting and the forest was turning purple. We set up camp, protected from the wind by dense thickets. Siva, as a jack of all trades, set up tents in a matter of minutes. We put up night vision cameras around the perimeter so we wouldn't miss anything. The bonfire crackled. The flames leaped up, driving away the chilly evening air. I started eating. I warmed up canned food from dry rations over a campfire. I boiled water for tea. The sky was darkening rapidly. Stars lit up one by one in the black void. The surrounding silence seemed to come alive. It seemed that the forest was breathing and the branches were whispering. Suddenly, a howl came from the depths of the thicket, scary and piercing. Offhand, you wouldn't guess what kind of beast is roaring like that. What if those tourists were eaten by wolves? Seva asked, shivering. I sighed, looking at the dancing flames, and tried to calm him down, and myself at the same time. No matter what they say, wolves don't attack humans. They've never met us, and we're strange to them. Imagine that you will see something multi-armed and intricate. You won't think about it, will you? Oh, the food! So the wolf, when he sees us, will think, what is this anyway? Not only are people afraid of something unknown, but animals too. Siva laughed. Yes, if I wasn't human, when I saw people, I'd think they were some kind of monsters. We're weird, bald, dressed in rags, walking on two legs and constantly making strange noises. We laughed a lot, but it seemed to me that our fun was kind of nervous. I think my friend also felt that something was wrong in this forest. Suddenly, there was a rustle. It was not loud, barely audible, but Seva also tensed up. This sound came from the bushes very close to our clearing. The wind or small animals couldn't make noise like that. We held our breath. Siva got up from the log. There was another rustling and crunching of branches. Someone was making their way through the undergrowth to our camp. Hey, who's there? No one answered, but kept walking. Stop! I'll shoot! I thought that such a statement should scare a person, but what was approaching us didn't seem to understand human speech. Then I stood up, raising my hand with a lighter. I had a pack of firecrackers in my pocket, just in case. Seva and I bought them, deciding it was better to be safe. Wild animals are scared by loud noises. The firecracker exploded in a bright flash and flew into the darkness. A deafening explosion spread the light through the forest. When the noise died down, nothing else was moving in the bushes. Siva stood all pale. Don't be afraid, I said. It was probably a wild boar or maybe a hare. No. Seva shook his head. A flash illuminated the bushes, and I saw a human silhouette. It wasn't a beast, a man, or anything like that. Something like a human being. You're out of your mind. I encouraged my friend to think rationally, but I was starting to shake myself. We fell silent, looking at the dark bushes, which, perhaps, hid an incomprehensible threat. My heart was pounding in my chest. We were standing on a small island of light, in the middle of an ocean of darkness. "Let's check the cameras," Seva said. They were all connected to his tablet, and he displayed the image on the screen. I was hoping that we would see some kind of animal and calm down, but there was something else. Seva rewound the recording a few minutes ago. On the first camera, the clearing with our tents was clearly visible. But then, there was the horror. Night vision devices recorded some naked people without faces. They had no eyes or noses, just mouths with some kind of tentacles instead of tongues. Some 5 minutes ago, they were standing at the edge of the clearing, and then a flash flashed, and they just disappeared into the darkness. My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe my eyes. I've always been a skeptic, but now I believe in everything possible. What is this? Seva was waiting for an explanation. My status as a legend debunker required a lot, but how was I supposed to know what it was? A monster? I asked stupidly. Dim. Are you out of your mind? What kind of monsters? We sat down on a log. The tablet trembled in Seb's hands. I clicked on the screen. These creatures could return at any moment. We switched from one camera to another, trying not to miss anything, and, fortunately, we only saw the dark outlines of the trees. So the night passed. We sat around the campfire until dawn, hardly talking. Finally, it became light. We didn't need to consult what to do. The answer is obvious. Get out of here as fast as you can. Seva packed his cameras and rolled up the tents. I packed my things in my backpack. I hope they'll believe us, that it's not fake, said the friend. Finally, we recorded a sync. I quickly recounted my night on the record and promised a sensation. I didn't want to linger. We already had valuable material. What's the point of taking any more risks? People probably really disappeared in this forest. And, most likely, we have found the reason. Faceless creatures caught in the frame of our cameras. It sounds silly, but it's a fact. An unknown species lives in this thicket. We walked along the path, guided by the marks we had left, but we could not see the exit. We walked longer than necessary. Seva looked at one of the ribbons and said, "Dan, it's torn and tied again. Look, this is my knot, but this one is not mine." My stomach turned cold. I understood, but they put me on the wrong track. These cunning creatures have transferred our marks. How bad is it? Are we lost? Seva was nervous. I asked him to cool down and reminded him that no one canceled emergency calls. I got through. We were asked, stay put and wait for 10 hours. We realized that it would be dark before that time. I didn't want to be at the mercy of darkness again. We can't sit and wait for the night, Seva said. We need to find a way out. The navigator didn't mess up, but the compass app seemed to be working smoothly, and we went deep into the forest to the north, to where the road should be. And suddenly a swamp appeared in front of us. It was overgrown with reeds, and a thick, putrid mist hung over it. The smell of decay permeated the air. Are those heads on the sticks there by any chance? The friend asked, pointing his finger forward. I looked closer and was startled. All right, they were human heads. They hung on wooden stakes sticking out of the green water, naked yellow skulls, faces green from decomposition, still fresh. male and female, with long, wet hair. They looked at us with dead, dull eyes. Everyone's mouths were open, blue. Swollen tongues were sticking out. Swarms of insects circled overhead. I felt sick and about to throw up. Seva, like a real cameraman, filmed everything on camera, forgetting about his feelings. And then, without saying word to each other, we walked away from the swamp in the other direction. We just moved wherever we looked. They clung to any signs of civilization, for every piece of plastic trash, shoe, and even an abandoned backpack. But all these things did not hint at the proximity to salvation. Rather the opposite. I was sure it all belonged to people who hadn't made it out of that damn forest. Seva and I breathed in time. We made our way through the undergrowth and repeated to each other that everything would be fine, that we would get out and come home. And suddenly, in the distance, through the dense branches of trees, I saw buildings, abandoned, destroyed, but still houses, simple log cabins. Someone's here, I said hopefully. There were 4 houses in total. 3 of them have completely rotted away, and their roofs have collapsed. One hut was still nothing, even though the door was hanging on a single hinge and the windows had no glass. At least some walls, more reliable than tents, said the friend. Seva, if there are huts here, then there must be a road from the forest somewhere nearby. We don't have to stay here, I said. My cameraman took me by the shoulder and said, looking into my eyes, "It's going to get dark soon. Do you want our heads to be strung on those sticks?" At the time, it seemed to me that this sounded convincing. We had a shelter. We could stay there and wait for help. Judging by the situation, this hut had been empty for decades. The ceiling was low and leaking. Primitive wooden furniture, a table, chairs, and a bed were covered with thick layers of cobwebs woven by many generations of spiders. There was a pile of iron and chains under one of the windows. They turned out to be old toothy traps used only for catching bears. "Let's try to install them around the house," suggested Seva. We got to work. It was difficult to open the traps, but it was real. I lifted all my hands on the rough, rusty surface. Seva checked one of the devices with a stick. It worked like the jaws of a shark. You can kill with them. That was exactly what was needed. We set up traps next to the windows. A friend hung his cameras on the trees so that they looked both into the forest and at the house. I made another call to the emergency number. The connection was really bad, but the operator understood us. He asked me to stay put so that it would be easier to track the location. All that remained was to wait. The cold night was falling on the forest again. There was a stove in the hut, though we didn't dare light it. Maybe the creatures will see the hearth or feel the smoke. Seva and I sat quietly, only occasionally exchanging a few words. All our conversations boiled down to hopes for a happy outcome. "I don't want our records to be taken away and classified," the friend said. "Are we risking our lives for nothing?" "They won't take it away, don't be afraid. We're gonna hit the jackpot with this report," I replied, pretending that anything other than survival mattered to me right now. An indistinct shadow flickered in the darkness outside the window. We listened carefully, quietly. Maybe it was just a bird that flew by? But suddenly there's a click. The trap snapped shut. The rusty mechanism creaked, and the chain clanked. Silence again. Seva grabbed his tablet, repeating, "Calm down. Calm down." Maybe it worked on its own. I jumped up too and stared at the screen. They were here. The shooting was done in real time. Several faceless creatures surrounded the house. One of them got trapped and knelt down to free his leg, which was almost cut in two. We watched it, afraid to even move. The creature effortlessly stretched the jaws of the trap. The broken bone snapped back into place, and the black incision in the pale skin instantly closed. They didn't seem to feel any pain. I wiped my face, having no idea what to do next. We were trapped in a hut surrounded by these terrible creatures. They could enter at any second, but for now, they just stood there. It's like they're waiting for something, Seva whispered. We understood that we were trapped. This hut, which seemed like a salvation to us, has now become a cage. And if we throw a firecracker, maybe they'll run away? I suggested. It worked last time. Let's distract them and get out, the friend replied. We didn't discuss anything else. We had no choice. I took out a lighter, lit the fuse, and threw a firecracker out the window. The explosion echoed throughout the forest. It sounded like a signal for action. Seva and I took advantage of the moment to rush to the door. They ran out of the hut, jumped over an open trap, and rushed into the unknown. The faceless creatures almost glowed in the dark. They were reaching out to us. We rushed past them like the wind. But then, Seva swore. He seems to have tripped over a tree root. I turned around to help him up, but I saw that he'd been grabbed. I wanted to rush to him, to snatch my friend from the clutches of these terrible creatures, but I realized that it was useless. There were too many of them. They dragged him along the ground, and he screamed, tearing his voice. "Don't let me go!" You dragged everything into the thick of the forest. I heard his pleas, but I couldn't help him. I ran as fast as I could. He ran until he stumbled and rolled head over heels into the enemy, hitting branches and rocks. He fell face first into the wet grass and sobbed like a child. Creepy images of my friend's last moments flashed before my eyes. His horrified face. A terrible scream stuck in my ears. Branches rustled somewhere in the thicket. Faceless people were looking for me. I didn't care anymore. The shock drove the fear of death out of my soul. I was lying at the bottom of a ravine, covered by thick ferns, and I didn't expect to live until dawn. But the hours passed unnoticed. The black sky was fading. The stars were fading. All the sounds in the forest had died down. The first rays of the sun were breaking through the branches of the trees. I was still alive. They didn't find me. But how much longer to wander through this forest, waiting for it to happen? I didn't know where I was going. I just had no other choice. Ascents, descents, endless trees, rocks. A shoe got stuck among them. Someone's broken phone was lying around in some kind of rotten rags. How many tourists hoped to get out? But they stayed here forever. And how many of them called the rescue service? Did they get anyone out? More trees. But they stayed here forever. And how many of them called the rescue service? Did they get anyone out? More trees. The silent thickets. The reeds. I found myself back at the edge of the swamp, with wooden stakes with severed heads sticking out of it. And there was another one among them. It's very fresh, in whose eyes the horror has not yet completely faded. It was my friend's head, sewing. I whispered with dry lips, peering into his face. He seemed to be looking at me too, and his mouth was stretched into silent screams. Help. I regretted seeing it. I didn't want to remember him like that, but it was too late. And now, this picture will forever remain in my memory. After standing for a while, saying goodbye to him, I set off again. My legs ached, my throat was dry, and I was so thirsty that my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I had only dark thoughts in my head. I'm going to die here. The night will come again. They will come. My head will be next to the stick. We will become just one of those who perished here. Nothing new. This forest seemed to stretch on endlessly. But suddenly, it ended. I came out of it like from a dark cave and found myself on the very road from where we came. The light of the cloudy sky seemed blinding. I stood in a stupor for a long time, not believing that the car had got out. It must be somewhere in the bushes. The shock was gone. The thirst for life has awakened in me again. My Jeep was parked in the bushes, the keys in my pocket. I climbed into the salon, saw an unfinished bottle of water and drained it in one fell swoop. Then, I started the engine, stepped on the gas and sped out of this damned place, where everything that was dear to me was gone. And the most annoying thing is that it was all for nothing. All the cameras, recordings, and evidence were left in the forest. Sever risked his life and died just like that. Not for what? And you know what? My team, Igor and Alyona, refused to continue working with me. They didn't believe my words. They thought I was making up a shocking story to justify my friend's disappearance. Igor said, "Even if you believe what you're saying, it doesn't change anything. All your stories about faceless creatures are nonsense. Dima, you're just delusional. You need to see a psychiatrist, okay?" But he was right. Oh yeah. After the incident, I couldn't sleep, couldn't work, and generally abandoned my YouTube channel. But I couldn't stop searching for the truth. From morning to night, I searched the internet for information, at least some information about this forest. I've read stories that I've never seen before. I searched through a bunch of forums, looking for evidence or at least some mention of faceless creatures. But there was nothing like that. However, when my hands had already dropped, I found one article about a certain community. Once upon a time, people, sectarians, lived in that forest. There weren't many of them. I don't know what to call it. They huddled in huts and worshipped some kind of forest creatures, which they considered to be the highest biological species. It was said that these creatures were the guardians of the forest, and that they could be dangerous to those who disturbed them. Those people also had a strange funeral custom. They beheaded the dead, drowned the bodies in a swamp, and strung the heads on sticks, so that the dead keep an eye on the living. It seemed that their world could not be understood, and there was no place for common sense. But I was on the ruins of that community. Siva and I saw everything with our own eyes. It's a pity that he will never come back and will not be able to confirm my words. Now, I'm a madman who can't be recognized. Unshaven, overgrown, raving about a mysterious forest. I've been having a lot of thoughts lately. Should I go there again? And look for evidence again? But if I don't come back, please don't forget this story. Believe in her. Not for me, but for Seva. He gave his life so that people would know the truth.